The wind howled like a hungry wolf that night, biting at the cracks in the old mud hut where a baby's cry pierced the silence. The midwife, her hands wrinkled and tired, held a tiny newborn wrapped in a cloth so worn it looked like dust might blow off it. She glanced down at the lifeless body of the young woman who had just died giving birth. No name, no family, just pain. "This child has no one," the midwife whispered to herself, her eyes lingering on the soft cries that echoed in the lonely dark. She hesitated by the door, torn between duty and helplessness. The baby's cries grew softer, weaker, almost as if it knew it wasn't wanted. Just as the midwife turned to leave, a shadow blocked the entrance. "Give me the child." The voice was calm, but there was steel in it. The midwife squinted into the darkness and recognized the figure. Mama Kem. She lived on the edge of the village with her daughter Zara. Known for her stern face and sharper tongue, Mama Kem was not the kind of woman who did things out of kindness. "You already have a daughter," the midwife said. "Why take another mouth to feed?" "I said, give me the child." Mama Kem didn't wait for more questions. The midwife hesitated, but handed the baby over. Mama Kem took the infant into her arms and pressed her close. The child stopped crying, as if she already knew this woman would be both her shelter and her storm. She named her Amara. It meant grace, though life ahead would offer her anything but. The hut was small. The roof leaked when the rains came. The floor was always cold, and the nights felt longer than they should. But Amara never complained. She believed Mama Kem was her real mother. She obeyed her, smiled when spoken to, and worked hard. At 5, she swept the compound. At 7, she carried water. At 10, she was cooking over open fire, while Zara sat under the mango tree, giggling with her friends. Zara, the golden child, was everything Amara wasn't. Light-skinned, soft-handed, spoiled. People noticed. As they grew older, the whispers in the village began. "That one, Amara, she doesn't look like them." Her skin was deep and rich, like fresh soil after the rain. Her eyes were wide, dark, and curious. Her hair fell in thick, coiled strands down her back. The village boys began to glance in her direction more than Zara's. The girls noticed. So did Zara. Jealousy is a quiet disease. It grows silently until it consumes. By the time they turned 16, Zara could barely hide her bitterness. Even the richest trader's son, the one she had dreamt of marrying since they were children, had started watching Amara with a smile he never gave Zara. One evening, Amara was scrubbing clothes by the well when she heard hushed voices in the kitchen. Curious, she tiptoed toward the door, heart fluttering. She had never eavesdropped before, but something in Zara's voice made her freeze. "She's not even your real daughter," Zara hissed. Amara's world tilted. "She's adopted, isn't she? That's why she looks different. She doesn't belong here, Mama. She's just a burden." There was a long pause, and then Mama Kem's sigh. "You're right. She was never mine. I should have left her that night. I made a mistake." The words sank into Amara's skin. Like acid, she stumbled back, her legs weak, her heart cracking open like dried clay in the sun. Everything she had believed, every memory, every smile, was now a lie. From that night on, they didn't pretend anymore. Mama Kem no longer called her daughter. Zara no longer faked kindness. Amara became the help, the unpaid servant. She scrubbed floors, fetched wood, cleaned after Zara, and ate what was left, if anything was left at all. Then, one morning, Mama Kem summoned her outside. "You're getting married." Amara blinked. "To who?" "To Kofi," Mama said flatly. Her blood turned cold. Kofi was a poor fisherman. He limped when he walked. Lived alone by the river in a hut, barely holding together. People laughed behind his back, called him cursed, useless, broken. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "Please, Mama." Mama Kem's hand gripped her arm with shocking force. "Don't call me Mama. I should have thrown you away years ago. You will marry Kofi today and leave this house. Do you understand?" Zara watched from the doorway, smiling. Amara felt her dignity die a quiet death. There was no celebration, no singing, no mother's blessing or father's handshake, just Amara walking silently behind Kofi, her only possession a small cloth bag and a broken heart. They reached the river's edge. His home stood crooked, half-rotted. A cracked bowl sat outside the door. Inside, a wooden bed, one stool, and silence. "This is your home now," Kofi said. Amara said nothing. She was expecting pain, expecting him to take what the village had given him, a wife to warm his bed and serve his food. But that night, he laid on the wooden bed and said nothing. He pointed to a mat on the floor. "You can sleep there." No touch, no threats. Amara curled on the mat, pulling her wrapper over her legs, the tears falling silently. She had been cast away like garbage, but somehow she wasn't alone. And though she didn't know it yet, the poor man she had been forced to marry was about to change her life forever. The first morning in Kofi's hut felt like waking in a stranger's skin. The roof creaked above her, the floor was cold against. Her feet and the smell of fish clung to the air like sadness that wouldn't wash off. Amara sat up slowly on her mat, her body sore from the hard floor. Kofi was already outside, silent as usual, sharpening his knife on a smooth stone by the steps. He didn't speak, neither did she. When she stepped out, the sun was just rising, casting golden light across the river's slow current. But peace was a luxury Amara had never learned to feel. Her ears caught the whispers before her eyes caught the stares. She used to walk proud, now she fetches water like the rest of us. Imagine all that beauty wasted on a cripple. I give it a week. She'll run back home crying. Amara didn't flinch. She kept her eyes down, jaw tight, as she filled her bucket from the river. The weight of their words was heavier than the water, but she carried it without spilling a single tear. When she returned, Kofi was cooking over the fire. Some boiled yam, plain and dry. He didn't say a word. But when she placed the bucket down, he turned, saw her soaked wrapper clinging to her legs, and reached for a towel. Without looking at her, he offered it. Just a simple gesture, but in a world where she was only ever given scraps, it felt like mercy. She reached for it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave her the tiniest nod. Days blurred into each other. Amara rose before the sun, cooked, cleaned, fetched water, and fixed the leaking roof with strips of palm. Kofi never asked her to. He never ordered, never complained. He simply let her move, always watching quietly, like he was waiting for something, but she didn't know what. Then came the market day. She walked the narrow dirt path with a basket balanced on her head, trying to ignore the gazes of other women. Their laughter sliced through the humid air. Look at her now. She thought she was better than us. Married a beggar, serves her right. The basket felt heavier with every step. Halfway back she stumbled. The yams tumbled into the mud, rolling down the hill like her pride. The women cackled. Even as a poor man's wife, she's useless. Amara knelt in the dirt, her hands trembling, eyes burning. But before she could reach for a single yam, a hand appeared in front of her. She looked up, and there was Kofi. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at the women. He simply picked up the basket, dusted off the yams, and handed them to her with quiet grace. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said. Her throat closed up. She nodded, too stunned to speak. It was the first time someone had defended her, gently, silently, without shame. That night, she sat outside the hut, the stars glittering above like things too far away to touch. Her stomach rumbled, but she was used to hunger. She had known it since she could remember. Still, when Kofi stood and disappeared into the hut, returning with a bowl of boiled yam and a flask of palm oil, she couldn't hide her surprise. "Eat," he said simply, placing the bowl beside her. "What about you?" she asked. He shrugged. "I already ate." But there was no second bowl, no crumbs on his lips, no lie in his eyes. He had given her the only food. She picked up the bowl slowly. Her hands trembled, not from hunger, but from the weight of something she couldn't name. Kindness, that rare, quiet thing that people like her weren't often shown. She ate, each bite warming her belly, and something deeper, something she thought had died long ago. The fever came 2 days later. It started with a dull ache in her head and chills that made her shiver under 3 wrappers. She tried to carry water anyway, to cook, to work, but her legs betrayed her. She fell, bucket crashing to the ground, and everything went black. When she woke, she was on the wooden bed, not the mat. The bed. A cloth was on her forehead. A fire burned in the corner. Kofi sat beside her, dipping another rag in cool water. His brows were tight, his jaw clenched, not in anger, but worry. "You fainted," he said. I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't speak," he replied, his voice unusually firm. "You're burning." He reached for a small bowl of herbs and spooned the bitter liquid to her lips. She winced, but swallowed. His touch was careful, not rough. His hands were calloused, but gentle. She stared at him as he stayed by her side, tending the fire, changing the cloth, guarding her like she was someone worth protecting. And in that fevered haze, a question curled in her heart like smoke rising toward the roof. Who was Kofi, the village had said? He was poor, useless, weak. But this man was something else entirely. Amara's body ached, but the fever had broken. She sat up slowly on the creaking wooden bed, her eyes scanning the small hut that had started to feel less like a prison and more like a quiet refuge. Kofi was outside, as usual, feeding the fire, his movements calm and steady. She didn't know how long she had been asleep. All she remembered were cool cloths, bitter herbs, and a voice whispering for her to hold on. A voice that had never once belonged to Mama Kem. Zara arrived that afternoon, as unwelcome as a snake in a child's blanket. She walked into the hut like she owned it, her silk wrapper swishing, her skin shining with oils, gold bangles stacked on her arms like trophies. A vanity, her nose wrinkled as she took in the hut. "So this is where you live," she sneered, waving a hand dramatically. "Even the chickens back home have better shelter." Amara bit her tongue. She didn't have the strength to fight, not with her body still weak. "I brought food," Zara said, dropping a basket on the ground. Inside was bread, fish, and vegetables, real food, not leftovers. Amara's heart jumped, her mouth watered. But when she reached for it, Zara yanked it back with a smile as sharp as a knife. "Oh, wait," she said with a giggle. "This isn't for you. I just wanted you to see what you're missing." She took a bite of bread slowly, dramatically, chewing like a queen, showing off her feast to a beggar. Amara's stomach twisted. Her fingers dug into the edge of the bed, but she didn't say a word. Just then, Kofi entered. He took one look at Amara's face, then the food, then Zara, whose smirk was now directed at him. "You again," he said flatly. Zara flipped her hair. "I was just being generous to my sister." Kofi stepped closer. "Leave." "Excuse me?" "I said," he repeated, his tone colder than she'd ever heard. "Take your games and your lies and leave." Zara blinked. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "I do," Kofi said. "A woman who takes joy in breaking others. Not here, not in my house." Zara's face flushed. She opened her mouth to speak, but the look in Kofi's eyes silenced her. It wasn't anger. It was authority. It was a man who had survived too much to be bullied by a little girl in gold. For the first time, Zara looked afraid. She stormed out, snatching the basket of food with her, her bangles clinking with each step. Amara stared at Kofi, stunned. No one had ever stood up for her like that, not Mama Kem, not even herself. Kofi walked over, picked up the cup Zara had left on the floor and threw it into the fire. Then he sat down beside Amara and said nothing. But in that silence, Amara heard everything she had been craving her entire life. Later that night, as the cold wind swept through the holes in the hut, Amara curled up on the mat, shivering. Kofi, on the wooden bed, noticed. He rose silently, walked over, and laid a thick cloth over her. It was worn, but warm. "You'll catch a fever again," she whispered. "I've survived worse," he replied simply. Amara clutched the cloth, warmth filling her chest, not from the blanket, but from the act. She closed her eyes, the tears pressing behind her lids. But this time, they weren't from pain. The next morning brought whispers. At the river, the women were gathered again, pretending to fetch water. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "That cripple bought food yesterday, real food." "With what money?" "Maybe he stole it." Another one muttered, "Where would he get that kind of money?" Amara clenched her fists. She filled her bucket quickly, then made her way back to the hut. She found Kofi sharpening his knife, calm as ever. "Where did you get the food?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He didn't look up. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "People are talking. They think you stole it." Kofi chuckled, a short, quiet sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Let them talk." Amara stared at him. "But I need to know, who are you really?" He finally looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "I'm just a man who doesn't want to see his wife suffer." Her heart thudded. There was something he wasn't saying, something hiding behind the limp, the silence, the small hut, something that didn't fit the story she'd been told about him. She didn't know what it was yet, but she was determined to find out. The following days passed like whispers on the wind, quiet but full of tension. Amara couldn't stop thinking about Kofi's words, a man who doesn't want to see his wife suffer. They circled in her mind as she washed clothes by the river, as she cooked in silence, as she lay on the mat at night, staring at the wooden ceiling. He was too gentle, too patient, too composed, not the man the village had painted as a broken fisherman. And now the rumors. Where did he get the money? How could a man with nothing offer food when others had none? She had questions, but Kofi gave her only silence and soft gestures. He would bring her warm food when her stomach rumbled. He would fix the leaking roof without being asked. He would watch her when he thought she wasn't looking. And each small kindness left another crack in the wall she had built around her heart. One evening, Amara sat outside peeling cassava while Kofi mended a broken fishing net. The sky was painted in orange and purple, the sun sinking slowly over the trees. She stared at him for a while, her thoughts churning. "Why do you live like this?" she asked suddenly. Kofi didn't look up. "Like what?" "Like someone who has nothing, when it's clear you're not just anyone." His hands paused for a beat, then continued weaving the net. "And what am I, Amara?" She hesitated. "I don't know yet, but I will find out." Kofi gave a soft smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Some questions carry a cost." "Then I'll pay it," she said firmly. He set the net aside and turned to her, his gaze deep and unreadable. "Why do you care?" Amara opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't sure. Maybe it was the way he had stood up to Zara. Maybe it was the way he never touched her without consent. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in her life, someone saw her not as a burden but as a person. "I care," she whispered, "because no one ever cared about me. And now, someone finally does." Kofi looked at her for a long time, the silence between them stretching like thread. Finally he stood. Come with me." They walked through the winding village paths, past curious eyes and murmured voices. The trees grew thicker as they moved, and the trail changed, from dry earth to stones polished with time. Finally they reached a gate, massive, iron-wrought, and out of place in this simple world. Amara stopped. Her heart began to race. "What is this?" Kofi didn't answer. He pushed open the gate. Inside was a grand compound. Golden lanterns hung from tall trees. A stone path led to a house, no, a mansion, with marble walls, glass windows, and a roof that sparkled in the dying light. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and wealth. Amara couldn't breathe. Her knees went weak. "This is your home?" she whispered. Kofi nodded. "It was, and now it's yours too." Amara turned to him, her voice cracking. "But why did you let me live in that broken hut? Why didn't you tell me?" Kofi's face was still unreadable, but his voice trembled slightly. "Because I wanted to know if someone could love me without all this." Tears stung her eyes. "You let me suffer. You let me think I was worthless." "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, "but I needed to know if you saw me, not my name, not my money." Amara stepped back, the mansion spinning around her. "You tested me," she whispered. "You watched me cry on a mat while you slept on a bed of gold." "Amara—" "No," she said, choking on her tears. "Do you know what it feels like to think no one wants you? To be thrown away like a rag? And then you, of all people, you had everything, and you said nothing." Kofi's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry." She turned, her voice barely a whisper. "I need time." And with that she walked away, leaving the gates of the mansion behind, and the man who had loved her in the only way he knew how. Amara walked until her legs ached and her feet blistered. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from Kofi, from the mansion, from the truth that had shattered her world. He had watched her sleep on a cold floor. He had seen her cry herself to sleep, and all along he could have stopped it. He didn't. She stopped in front of the one place she swore she'd never return to, Mama Kem's compound. The wooden gate hadn't changed. The porch still sagged. The mango tree still leaned to the side like it was tired of living there. She hesitated, but something inside her wanted answers, or maybe just a place to scream. She knocked. The door opened. Zara stood there in her usual glory, silk wrapper, golden bangles, and that permanent smirk. "Well, well," she said, folding her arms. "Look who came crawling back." Amara clenched her jaw. "I'm not here for you." Zara rolled her eyes and leaned against the doorframe. "Let me guess. You finally realized that your crippled husband can't give you what you want." Amara's fists tightened, but she said nothing. Zara's voice dropped to a cruel whisper. "Did he finally raise his hand? Or did you just get tired of eating boiled yam every night?" Then she pulled out something from her pocket, a shiny gold bracelet. Amara's heart dropped. Her bracelet. The only thing she had from her birth mother. She had hidden it deep, in her old clothes before leaving Mama Kem's house. Somehow they had found it. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Zara dangled it like a toy. "Mother found it. Said you wouldn't need something this beautiful anymore. I kept it as a souvenir, to remember the orphan girl who thought she was special." Tears pricked Amara's eyes. Then in one cruel motion, Zara threw the bracelet to the ground and stepped on it, grinding it into the mud with her heel. Amara gasped and shoved her aside, falling to her knees. She picked it up with trembling hands. It was bent now, dirty, broken, just like how they had tried to break her. Zara clapped mockingly. Oh, poor Amara, crying over a piece of trash, just like her life. Before Amara could respond, a shadow fell over them both. Kofi. He had followed her. He took one look at the scene. Amara on the ground, clutching the bracelet. Zara standing smug. and something in him snapped. "Get out," he said. Zara blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Kofi said, his voice low and hard. "Take your cruelty and leave." Zara scoffed. "How dare you talk to me like that?" "I dare," he said, stepping forward, "because I've watched what you are. You don't love anyone, not even yourself." Zara's eyes widened. For the first time, she saw him not as a poor man, but as someone powerful, someone dangerous. She backed away slowly, then turned and stormed back into the house. Amara was still on the ground, shaking, her broken bracelet in her hand. Kofi knelt beside her. Without a word, he took the bracelet from her, wiped off the mud with his sleeve, and carefully straightened the metal with the back of his knife. It wasn't perfect, but it looked whole again. He handed it back to her gently. Their fingers touched. She looked at him through blurry eyes. "Why do you keep helping me?" Kofi's voice was quiet. "Because I know what it's like to be broken and to have no one fix you." Amara looked down at the bracelet in her hands, and for the first time she didn't feel abandoned. She felt seen. She clutched the bracelet to her chest and whispered, "Thank you." Kofi didn't reply. He didn't need to. His silence had already said everything she needed to hear. That night, Amara sat alone in the corner of the mansion Kofi had brought her to. She turned the bracelet over in her hands, still bent, still scratched but hers. It reminded her of herself, damaged but not destroyed. The golden walls around her, the velvet curtains, the polished floors, they all felt too rich, too far from the girl who once lived on a mat and ate crusts of leftover food. And yet here she was, dressed in silk, with a fire warming her skin and a man who had given her everything, except the truth. She hadn't spoken to Kofi since they returned. He had given her space, just like he always did, quiet, respectful, but not distant. That made it harder. If he had shouted, lied, pushed, she could hate him. But he didn't. He just loved her, in silence. And that silence was now suffocating her. The next morning she walked into the garden, barefoot, letting the grass cool her feet. She found Kofi sitting under the old fig tree, sharpening his knife like always. He looked up as she approached, his eyes unreadable. "I need to know the truth," she said. No more trembling, no more hesitation. He set the knife aside. "You already know it." "No," she said. "I know part of it. I know you're rich. I know you let me live in suffering, but I don't know. Why me?" He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Sit." She did. He spoke softly, like the memories still hurt to say out loud. "My father was one of the wealthiest men in the region. We had everything, land, servants, a house 3 times the size of this one. But when I was 15, I got sick. A fever that nearly killed me. I survived, but my leg didn't. I've walked with this limp ever since." Amara's eyes softened. She listened, not interrupting. "My father couldn't bear the shame. A disabled son. He said I was weak. Said I'd bring disgrace to his legacy. He sent me away." "Just like that?" Amara whispered. Kofi nodded. "I went from silk sheets to sleeping on wet dirt. I learned to fish, to beg, to build with my hands. I learned who I was without money, and I learned what people really thought of a man who walked with a limp." Amara swallowed hard, her heart breaking for him. "So when I became successful again," he continued, "when I built my own business, started investing quietly, I decided I would never let anyone close to me unless they saw me. Not the wealth, not the mansion, just me." Amara looked down. "So I was your test." "You were my chance," he said quietly. "When I heard what your mother planned, I said yes." She raised her eyes to meet his. "You chose me, knowing what I'd been through." He nodded. "Because I saw you. Not your name, not your clothes, not your background. You had nothing, but you still stood tall. You didn't beg. You didn't break. I knew you were stronger. Then you believed. Amara's lips trembled. But I did break. No, Kofi said. You survived. That's not the same thing. Silence fell between them again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was honest. Later that day, as Amara was helping in the kitchen, she heard whispers outside. She paused by the window. Did you hear? One woman said. Kofi isn't poor. He owns land, shops, everything. Another woman gasped. And he married that girl, Amara, the orphan. Jealousy, envy, disbelief, all in their voices. Amara didn't flinch. For once, the gossip didn't sting. She had lived her whole life, bending under words. Now she was beginning to rise above them, but that peace wouldn't last. That evening, as the sun dipped low, a group gathered outside the mansion gates. Mama Kem was at the front, her face twisted in fury. Zara stood beside her, arms crossed, lips curled in hatred. Come out, Amara, Mama Kem bellowed. You don't belong in this house. Amara froze. Kofi appeared at her side, calm as ever. Stay inside. No, Amara said. Her voice was steady. I need to face her. They stepped out, together. The crowd quieted when they saw Kofi, tall, composed, dressed in the finest woven tunic, no longer hiding who he was. Mama Kem's lips twisted. You stole what should have been Zara's. Kofi stepped forward. No, you gave her away. Silence fell like a hammer. Mama Kem's eyes widened. What? You gave Amara to me, he said, like trash, like she had no value, and now that you know who I am, suddenly you want her back? She was never yours, Mama Kem spat. Kofi's voice dropped. But she's mine now. Amara felt something in her chest crack open. Pride, belonging, love. The crowd began to murmur. The villagers looked at each other, some stepping back, ashamed. Mama Kem's voice wavered now. You think you're better than us? Kofi's eyes never blinked. I know she is. The crowd began to scatter, their angry chants dissolving into embarrassed whispers as they turned away from the mansion gates. Kofi stood tall, unmoved. But Amara, she stood still, her eyes locked on Mama Kem, the woman who had raised her, with bitterness instead of love, and now stood outside her home with rage in her heart. You were never my daughter, Mama Kem snapped, as if it would sting the same way it used to, but it didn't, not anymore. Amara's voice was soft, but strong. I know. That one sentence made Mama Kem flinch. The power she used to have, the control, the fear, it was gone. You always treated me like I was unwanted, Amara said, stepping forward, like I was a burden you were forced to carry, and I believed it. I believed I didn't deserve love, that no one would ever choose me. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. But you were wrong. She turned to look at Kofi. He chose me. When you threw me away, he gave me a home. When you called me a mistake, he saw value in me. And when you laughed at my pain, he gave me comfort. Zara scoffed from the side, all because you got lucky. Don't act like you earned any of this. Amara's gaze snapped to her. I didn't need to earn love, Zara. I needed to believe I deserved it. And now, I finally do. Zara opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. For the first time, she saw Amara not as the poor, unwanted orphan, but as a woman standing in her own power, and it scared her. Mama Kem stood frozen, her face pale, lips trembling. Go home, Amara said gently. There's nothing left for you to take from me. Mama Kem looked like she wanted to argue, to fight, to throw more poison, but instead her shoulders sank. She turned slowly and walked away. her pride dragging behind her like a torn wrapper. Zara followed, though not before throwing one last venomous glance at Kofi, but he didn't spare her a look. Amara stood there in silence, and for the first time, she didn't feel broken. She felt free. That night, the stars glittered like 1,000 tiny hopes in the sky. Kofi and Amara sat on the balcony, sipping warm tea. No words passed between them for a long time. Finally, Kofi broke the silence. "I never meant to hurt you," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. Amara turned to him, her eyes softer now. "I know, and I think maybe I needed to be broken in order to rebuild myself." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. "I can't promise I'll always be perfect," he said, "but I promise I'll never stop trying to make up for what I didn't give you in the beginning." Amara smiled faintly. "You gave me the most important thing anyone ever has." "What's that?" "A choice." A few days later, a letter arrived at Mama Kem's house. The handwriting was careful, the ink slightly smudged in places. It read, "Mama Kem, I know you never loved me. I know you didn't want me, but still, I want you to know that I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine, because I can't carry hate in my heart anymore. I have a new life now, a life full of love, safety, and dignity. I finally feel like I belong somewhere. I wish things had been different between us, but they're not. So this is goodbye, with peace." Amara Mama Kem stared at the letter for a long time. Her old hands trembled, and for the first time in years, a tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. She whispered the name she had once refused to say, with love. Amara. And for the first time, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel. Regret. Back at the mansion, Kofi had something in his hand. A small, black box. He turned to Amara as they walked through the garden. "I've been waiting for the right moment." She raised a brow. "To do what?" He dropped to one knee. Amara froze. Kofi opened the box, revealing a diamond ring that sparkled like sunlight on water. "We were forced into marriage," he said, "but this time, I want to ask you with a full heart," he smiled. "Will you marry me again, Amara, by choice?" Amara gasped, her hand over her mouth. And then the tears came, the kind that didn't hurt, tears of joy, of healing. She nodded through her sobs. "Yes, yes." Kofi stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he wrapped his arms around her, pressing his forehead to hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I know," she whispered back. "I believe it, now." And for the first time in her life, she truly did. The mansion glowed with laughter and soft music as the evening breeze danced through its tall windows. For the first time, it wasn't just a big house. It was a home. The second wedding wasn't grand in the way the world often expected. There were no hundreds of guests, no trumpets, no golden carriages, but it was perfect in its own way. Kofi stood at the altar, no longer in worn trousers and a limp that carried shame, but in a deep blue agbada stitched with golden thread. His chin was held high, his eyes held only one thing, her and Amara. She glowed, not just because of the new dress that wrapped around her like royalty, not because of the delicate gold jewelry that kissed her ears and wrists, but because she was no longer the girl who had been thrown away. She was the woman who had found herself and chosen her own life. As they stood hand in hand, the village watched in awe. Many of them had mocked her, whispered behind her back, thrown stones with their words. But now they clapped, and when the chief himself stepped forward to bless the union, even the proudest of them bowed. Zara and Mama Kem did not attend. But Amara didn't need them anymore. She had forgiven, yes, but she no longer chased validation where none would be given. She had learned that healing didn't mean going back to the people who broke you. It meant moving forward without them. That night, under the soft lanterns hung from the trees, Amara and Kofi sat side by side in the garden. The stars blinked. Overhead, the sound of crickets like music in the silence. Amara rested her head on Kofi's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if Mama Kem had never taken me in?" Kofi tilted his head slightly. "You would have survived anyway," she chuckled. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "Because you're not here because of her or me. You're here because you never gave up on yourself, even when it felt like the world did." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Thank you." "For what?" "For being the one who stayed." She said, voice soft. "Even when I didn't know how to love you back." Kofi turned and kissed her forehead. "That's what love is, waiting until the person you love believes they deserve it." Months passed, seasons changed, and the mansion grew warmer, not just with sunshine, but with joy. Amara opened a small school at the edge of the village, a place for children like her, forgotten, unwanted, or simply in need of someone who saw them. She taught them how to read, how to speak with confidence, how to carry their scars with pride. The same villagers who once mocked her now brought their children to her door. She never turned anyone away. Kofi, on the other hand, slowly revealed himself to the world, not as the poor fisherman, but as a powerful, wise businessman who had chosen humility until he found love. His wealth no longer felt like a secret, because he no longer feared being loved for the wrong reasons. They built together, laughed together, healed together. One afternoon, as Amara sat on the porch watching children chase each other in the yard, a familiar figure appeared at the gate. Mama Kem, older now, slower, her back more hunched than before. In her hands was a small, wrapped basket. Amara stood up, unsure what to feel. "I don't want anything," Mama Kem said, her voice hoarse. I wanted to see you, to see that you're all right." Amara didn't smile. She didn't scowl either. She stepped forward and looked the woman in the eyes. She said simply. Mama Kem's eyes welled. She held out the basket with trembling hands. It's food. Just food." Amara took it slowly, her fingers brushing the old woman's. There were no hugs, no words of affection, but there was something far more powerful, a pause, a quiet breath between two people who had hurt each other deeply, but were no longer defined by that pain. "I forgive you," Amara said again, this time with no anger buried beneath the words. "But you can't be in my life. Not now." Mama Kem nodded slowly. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She turned and walked away, and Amara stood tall, her arms empty, but her heart full. That night, Amara stood beside Kofi, both of them wrapped in silence, watching the stars. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who scrubbed floors and ate leftovers, who cried into a thin wrapper and thought love was something she had to earn. And then she looked at the woman she had become. Loved, respected, whole. "Are you happy?" Kofi asked, breaking the silence. Amara smiled. "I am." He took her hand, kissed it softly, and together they stood under the sky, two souls who had been broken by the world, but healed in each other's arms, not because their love was perfect, but because they had chosen it, and this time no one could take it away.